Welcome to the Wholehearted Impact podcast with Jen Majors, where we talk about healing, faith, identity, purpose, and the courage to live fully alive. If you're ready to break free from what has held you back, renew your mind, and walk in truth, freedom, and wholehearted purpose, you are in the right place. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the cost of unhealed trauma. Unhealed trauma does not stay hidden. It shows up in the way we think, the way we relate, lead, cope, and live. Unhealed trauma creates dis-ease inside of our body. We're meant to heal. We're supposed to feel pain and let it process and teach us. We're not supposed to keep it stuck. That keeping it stuck turns into suffering, turns into deep-seated suffering. Trauma doesn't always look dramatic. Unhealed wounds can show up as fear, reactivity, distrust or mistrust, self-sabotage, emotional shutdown, toxic relationships, addiction or numbing, and even overachievement. These things can impact your business, the way that you lead, your family, your faith, and ultimately your health. It is super costly to ignore the signs of unhealed trauma. Statistics say, if you read in my book, Wholehearted Healing, statistics say that about half of the children of the world experience some sort of childhood trauma, which is just sad to even consider. And I wish there was a way to create a miracle and heal that, so that children everywhere could grow up in a strong foundation of a family, to experience love and acceptance at a deep level, to have confidence, to know who they are, to see themselves through the eyes of their loving parents and their loving God. And yet we have pain in the world that we label as trauma. When we ignore the trauma and we don't process it, it shows up later in our life, or it shows up in our life. It shows up as deep fear, inability to move forward because we're fearful about something. It shows up as not trusting ourselves or not trusting other people, seeing the world through the lens of a victim. When we experience trauma, we are a victim, and we must choose that we do not stay in victimhood. We have to shift into creator in order to experience something different. Ignoring it also creates self-sabotage, where we might be experiencing something beautiful, and let's say a beautiful relationship and somebody that really loves us, but because we're not used to that, we sabotage it without even realizing that's what we're doing, because we're so afraid and we don't know how to function in a healthy relationship. And so because of that, and because we learned that the only way we can function is in a dysregulated, unsafe relationship, we know how to maneuver through that, we'll sabotage it. Or if something really great happens at work, we somehow don't have a positive view about ourselves, and so we'll sabotage it by doing some behavior that goes against ourselves and goes against that positive situation. Ignoring trauma also creates emotional shutdown. The stuffing of emotions, and those emotions are just going to get stuck in our bodies if we don't allow it to process. It'll create mistrust or distrust. When we're traumatized and we don't have positive examples growing up, we don't know how to trust ourselves. We don't know how to trust others. And so we might be in a really beautiful relationship and then we don't trust them. No matter what they do, we judge them as not trustworthy because the other people in our life weren't trustworthy. Ignoring trauma creates toxic relationships without boundaries. Boundaries are important. Boundaries are there to keep relationships positive, to keep them joy-filled and happy, and both parties getting what they need and giving what they need from the relationship. Toxic relationships happen, abusive relationships and things like that happen when we don't heal trauma, because it keeps showing up in our life until we choose to do the work to heal that so it stops showing up in our life. Unhealed trauma creates addiction or numbing because we're constantly stuffing. We feel terrible. We're suffering. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust the world. And therefore, I'm just going to go numb myself out and just ignore and get really comfortable. And then we just start over. And then we've got guilt and shame on top of it most oftentimes. And then it just compounds and keeps compounding. And we have this vicious cycle of fear and numbing and choosing and showing up in a way that is not who we want to show up as. Then we don't love ourselves and we judge ourselves and we keep ourselves separate from people. And if there's one thing I know is our purpose is to connect with each other. We're not meant to be separated. Unhealed trauma also shows up as overachievement. Always having to prove you're worthy of love and belonging. We're worthy of love and belonging no matter what we do or how we behave. Everyone is worthy of love and belonging. And above all this, let the hope be there that awareness truly is 90% of this work. Just garnering the awareness and then not having any judgment about it. That just says, oh man, isn't this curious? Here I am showing up this way. Isn't that interesting? Just getting curious about what's there. Offering yourself compassion and not judging yourself. This creates the possibility of change. And so just remember these 3 key things. That pain is inevitable. Pain is part of the human experience, but suffering is not. Trauma doesn't always have to look super dramatic. People who are traumatized sometimes don't experience a super terrible childhood experience. Who knows what they went through? What you don't heal can shape how you lead and love. Our feelings are meant to be felt so they can be messengers to ourselves so that we could do the work to move through us and allow that healing to happen. Sometimes naming the costs helps motivate change. So if I were to name some of the costs of having unhealed trauma inside of my body, is my health has taken a hit. I've had to move through having a full radical hysterectomy at 30 years old. That threw me into menopause, started aging my heart and my lungs instantly as if I was a menopausal woman, and I had 20 years to go. And that specifically happened because of the unhealed trauma within my body. I am a firm believer of it. I often wonder what life would be like and how many more babies I would have if I had chosen healing over suffering. If I had listened to my body and allowed it to speak to me about what I actually needed instead of choosing suffering. I often wonder what I would have done had I listened to my friend who called me right before my hysterectomy and said, hey, Jen, God said not to do it. Don't have a hysterectomy. And I said, oh man, I'm in so much pain. I just can't keep doing this. I just have to do it. And she pleaded with me. And I said, I just can't keep experiencing this loss. I have to do it. That evening, right before my hysterectomy, I had a dream, a very vivid dream, where I'm just in a white room and I'm standing naked. And I look on the floor and there's my bloody uterus right there on the floor. I know that's a little gross, but it was this messaging that I just kept ignoring. And it truly, I don't regret much in my life, hardly anything. I believe things happen for a reason. And that particular thing, it kept me from never being able to have another baby. And I really regret that. I really regret having a hysterectomy. And so those are some of the costs of living unhealed. I'd like to invite you for some journaling. Where has unhealed pain been costing me more than I realize? Ask yourself that. Where has unhealed pain been costing me more than I realized? Unhealed pain always costs something. Let's talk about what it may be costing you. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of the Wholehearted Impact Podcast. If this encouraged you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs hope today. For more resources, coaching, speaking, and my book, visit wholeheartedimpact.com.